Founders, welcome back to the 0 to 5,000 podcast, where we obsess over the convergence of human potential and business results. Today, our hosts Drew McClure and Jordan Mitchell have another insightful conversation for you. So let's jump right in.
Okay, founders, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with the CEO and co-founder of O3 Energy, Brad Stutzman. Brad specializes in entrepreneurial startups, project development, real estate finance, and energy finance. O3 Energy is a renewable energy services company whose focus is providing energy solutions to heavy power users. O3's energy expertise is the development, financing, construction, and operation of energy generation systems and facilities. The company as a whole specializes in providing their clients with affordable, clean energy through on-site generation. O3 Energy is growing like crazy. So Brad, my new friend, let's get right to it. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Drew.
Yes, sir. So typically when we start off this conversation, I'm asking about the origin story, and we might get into your story some here today. But like I mentioned before we got recording, I want to take a little bit different angle. And where I want to start is present day. And I just want to get a sense of what your world is like. Our world in general has changed so much. We've been all forced to be at home, and now some places are open, and we're back and forth. And so I'm just curious, what does a typical week look like in your life right now when it concerns work?
Well, I mean, right now it's very dynamic. I don't think there's anything static about the weeks with COVID. Everything seems to change daily, right? Sometimes we're having some sort of back and forth of masks in the office, not masks in the office, things of that nature. It's kind of a hybrid sort of model right now. I try to make it in the office as much as possible. Most of the team tries to make it into the office as much as possible. But, for instance, I think someone the other day, they had, their child had a COVID outbreak at their home or at their school. And so they had to stay home for the week because the kid, her child had to quarantine. So, it's kind of, if we can be in the office, we're in the office. If not, then, we're accommodating accordingly. So.
Yeah. For you right now in your role, what would you say your time is most being used for? Where are you most using your time?
As CEO, I feel like a lot of my time is attacking fires here and there that need to be put out. Getting a phone call from an employee that, hey, this just happened, or there's how should we address this over here or that. I would say I feel like that's 90% of my role on a day-to-day basis.
I was about to ask the question, do you feel like you're a firefighter, but I didn't want to lead the witness at all. Has it always been that way, or is that more recent that you feel like most of your time is spent just, responding to things?
It's it comes and it goes. I feel like we go through these waves of, there's a ton of little fires that we need to put out here or there, or, then sometimes it gets situated. Plus also, as we bring on new employees or rotate out old employees, sometimes these fires are also a learning experience. And so, once a new employee encounters it once, then, they know how to handle it the next time. Things like that. So I may not get that same phone call. So,
Sure.
Look at it like that, as well as a teaching experience and teaching the team on how I would address it and how they should address it themselves.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Now, what's the size of the team right now at O3?
So right now we're around 30 employees.
Yeah.
We were up before COVID right around 50, and then we had to scale back a little bit.
Sure. When we get into that firefighting season, where that's our primary role, I often hear a tension between the urgent, or the feeling of urgent, which is the thing that's breaking or the person that needs intervening, or, that kind of thing, versus the important, the thing that is more future oriented, that is about the big goal we're going after, and that they feel at war or in tension. Do you feel that at all?
Well, I mean, I feel like they're a lot of times at war for my time.
That's what I mean.
What can I address? It's difficult to focus on growth and focus on the future whenever you're sitting here, thinking about how do I address this thing today? And, it's tough to look at the long-term planning. A lot of times what I try to do is just make sure that I delegate the proper time to, one over the other. If, I'm the type of person that I'll work on the weekends if I need to. And so a lot of times if it's something where this week I was putting out some fires here or there, I may focus on, growth or thoughts about growth over the weekend. Because I can definitely do that on my own time while I'm, in the gym thinking about things, or, walking a trail somewhere. I can, a lot of times I'll, walk along the trail and just jot down ideas. Sometimes that's also gives me a better, gets the juices flowing, so to say, and gives me a little bit better thought process. And I can just jot down some stuff on my phone here, there, some notes, email myself with thoughts about, what I want to do for growth.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that also just makes me think of, you mentioning going on a walk, jotting down ideas as you go, some of the things that help you continue to show up and be your best at work, right? That either gives you back energy or clears your head or helps you see things. Talk me through that. Is there anything you do daily or weekly, like you just mentioned, that really helps you just kind of be your best?
Yeah, I mean, I like to work out every day. If it's nice out, most of the time you can catch me on the Katy Trail here in Dallas, walking the trail, just clearing my head in nature. And that's one of my favorite things there. Also, a lot of times I do some of my best work, I feel like, on the road. So, a lot of times if I'm if I haven't had a business trip in a while, where I needed to be somewhere for something, I may just schedule a trip to go because I want to go there. And it's a lot of times helps me, it gets me out of my environment that I'm in all the time. Gives me a little bit different thought process, things like that. And so a lot of times I'll do that to kind of spur that thought process.
Yeah, I love that. And prioritizing that, right? Like
Right.
you're paying attention to what your body needs, your mind needs, sometimes even what your heart needs in any given season. And making the time for that's important, right?
Right.
Man, it makes me think of, again, back to what we were talking about, because I'm in conversations with founders like yourself, obviously on the podcast every day and then in our work every day. And I want to hit back on that feeling of being a firefighter. It's usually something they would describe as regrettable, knowing that they're necessary. Like, yeah, of course, like I've got to step in and do that, but that it feels like sometimes the business is setting your priorities, right, instead of the other way around. And especially if the business grows, you've got 30 people. You've got a successful business with a lot of different moving parts, and at some point it feels like maybe the tail is wagging the dog instead of the dog wagging the tail.
Right.
Is that how this feels, or is it different in your case right now?
I mean, it can feel like that on, some days it can feel like that. I try to not let it ever get too far down that path where I have some, where the tail is wagging the dog, so to say. I think whenever you get to that point, a lot of times, you may not have full control over, the dynamics of the company. And so never want to fully get down that path like that. But, certainly there are situations that may pop up on a certain day, or, certain week in which, it does really feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you experience this or not, but I'm leading my first business right now. So I have nothing else to compare it to, right?
Uh,
And then you get in it, and at some point you're like, what does it mean for me to be the founder, the co-founder of, like, what's expected of me? What should I
right.
be doing? How do I think about my role here? And it evolves as the company evolves, right?
Right.
So is there anything that's helping you think through, like, this is what my role is right now. This is giving me clarity on best use of my time, or what the company needs more from me or less from me. How do you think about that?
Yeah. So a lot of times what I think about is, the quote that I always think is hilarious is whenever people, come to you and they're like, oh, it must be great. You have your own business. You're a CEO. You have no boss, and I'm like, well, I do have a boss. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, my customers are my boss. My employees are somewhat my boss,
Yeah.
and then we have investors. Investors are my boss as well. It's like, those are the things that I have to take into account whenever I'm, making decisions for the company. Those are where my priorities lie as far as that goes. So, you do have a boss, even though you are the boss.
Yeah. 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 So when you wake up every day, how would you answer the question, the most important thing for me to do today is what?
The most important thing for me to do today is to push the business forward.
Hmm.
And each day it depends on what it is that the business needs to be pushed forward. So whether it's, focus on some operations, focus on some sales, focus on, some management needs here or there. Each day entails something a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's pushing that business forward.
I love that. Even that is so helpful. Again, for me, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. My main job is to move the business forward, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
Have you noticed that has changed in and out in from the beginning till now? Like sometimes at the beginning, we are doing all the work. We're
Right.
landing the deals. We're out there servicing the client, and then at some point you're like, I think I need to hire someone to do that so that I can keep doing this part. Has that changed for you at all?
Yeah, it actually has. I would say a lot of times early on, whenever I was the one out there, doing everything, I'd bring on a new employee and they were there to, support me. And now it's kind of changed the other way around. As we've gotten to be a bigger team, the team kind of does the bulk of the work. And then I ask them, what do you need from me for me to support you versus the other way around.
Mm,
And a lot of times with that feedback, you can also see how the business is doing, where they're tweaking, because they're the boots on the ground now. I'm no longer the boots on the ground as much as I would love to be. I just can't do that much from a day-to-day standpoint. I don't have that many hours in the day to do, what is, 24 times, 30. I just can't do that. That's just physically impossible. So, my role now is to support them more than the other way around in pushing the company forward.
oh, I love that. It makes me think of some executive I was listening to that was saying, very similar idea. My main job now is to remove the obstacles for the team.
Right.
They're the ones doing the work, and I just got to listen and know what obstacles need removing so they can keep doing their work.
Yep. Exactly.
How do you go about getting that feedback from your team? Is it just organic right now? Is it you just in general valuing listening to them, or is there anything in particular you guys are doing to get feedback from your
Well, I
people?
mean, we have I have weekly meetings with, different managers to get that feedback. And then a lot of times, I mean, I'll just pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, looks like, this happened or that happened. What are your thoughts on why that happened? And a lot of times I'll even tell them, just speak frank.
Mm,
I'm not here to look at what's right or what was wrong or to scold anyone. I just want the feedback. So I think that that's really critical as well, is to try to take that take take that piece of that people being defensive out of the situation, because then you can get proper feedback versus a tweaked feedback to, someone's concerned about getting in trouble or, some sort of repercussions, because everyone makes mistakes. And,
right.
I make mistakes and we all have to work through them. Making a mistake's not going to kill us, but, we need to figure out what we did wrong so that we don't repeat that mistake.
Yeah, those are totally different cultures, aren't they? The one where you feel like you're in a gotcha moment where the boss is calling and saying, "Hey, what happened on this?"
Right.
and you're trying to give an excuse, right? Or you're trying to, protect yourself in some way because you're worried about the repercussions versus the boss is calling because you guys want to get better. And it's
Right.
not about pointing fingers. It's hey, let's just autopsy this. What happened? What went well? What
Exactly.
didn't go well? Has that been difficult? Like if because I've experienced most people have had probably negative experiences before coming to work somewhere, or they're used to an environment of CYA, like covering your own
Right.
ass, and they're not as used to sometimes trusting you and saying like, yeah, he just wants to know what's going on. I'll share with him.
Right. Well, I mean, I started. We were having some issues with some of our residential production, and so I really got involved with that to kind of tweak some things. And one of the things I implemented in the weekly meeting was, what did we do? Because we're planning out the next week and looking back at the previous week, and it's like, what did we do right this week, and what did we do wrong? And it was amazing how much the guys would actually bring up, hey, I did this wrong, or this, like I screwed up here this week, versus, start pointing fingers at other people, or just harp on everything that was great, great for the week, and just acting like nothing went wrong. It seemed like, everyone was more apt to sit there and say, I maybe, screwed up here a little bit, but I learned from it, but, I'm not going to do it again. Or, we, didn't get an order in on time, and so it was delayed a day, little things that, were really tweaking to help us get a little bit better.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. Did you notice after implementing that you were getting useful information back that helped you change your process or your systems or your service better?
Absolutely. Well, and then just a learning experience for, individuals on the team as well.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of kind of the lean startup idea, where the main premise is how fast can you go through the cycle of building, then measuring, and then learning. And
Right.
you just keep repeating. All right, we build something, then we measure how it went, and then we learn from it, and then we tweak what we did. And the person was basically saying, like, how fast you do that, how many times in a year you do that, determines like how quickly you can grow effectively, right?
Right.
And it sounds like you guys are doing a version of that kind of feedback loop. Like, we always want to know what went well and what didn't go well.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, because at the end of the day, nobody has all the answers, and it's about figuring out figuring out those answers.
Totally. And that's what I resonated with. His basic premise was that entrepreneurialism, I guess, being an entrepreneur is in large part navigating the unknown.
Right.
We all like to think it's known. We act like it's known. It's like, no, in many aspects of this business, we are navigating the unknown.
Right. Well, I mean, if it was known, it wouldn't be entrepreneurship. It wouldn't be something new that you're creating. It would be something that's, been there forever. So,
Yeah.
These have to be new ideas.
Well, especially with the industry you're in with renewable energy, I know it's not new, but it
Right.
certainly isn't mainstream. Like, in terms of like it's still being adopted as an
In its
alternative.
infancy stages.
Yeah. So what is that? Just talk to me about that. How challenging has that been, that you're not just building a company in a known space that everybody's using gas or everybody's
Right.
using, electric energy for whatever, but we're in renewable energy. How difficult has that been?
I mean, it's, I've been in the industry for about 12 years now. So, I've seen a lot of changes. And honestly, that's one of the things that I like about the industry, is that it is in its infancy stages. So you don't have a lot of people out there saying, we've done it like this for 100 years, and, this is what works. All this other stuff doesn't work, because people are still trying to figure out, you see, certain things that, yesterday they said don't work in the, solar space. Now they're trying and find out that they work, so it's just amazing, some of the changes, just for example, some of the technologies were, you always want your solar panels facing due south if you're in the northern hemisphere, right? It never go east and west with it. That was always, traditional thought process. Then now some of the racking systems that they're coming out with are east-west facing, but the way that they have them stacked, you're able to squeeze more panels into a smaller space than, because you don't have shadowing over the other one. They're back to back, because you're capitalizing on getting a lot of solar or sun radiance in the morning from the east, and then capitalize on getting a lot of it in the evening on the west. And so, just these different attacks on, or different takes on how to implement it is really, original thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of innovation still
Right.
available, right? Where no one's just entrenched in their old ideas of how to do this. It's a little bit of the frontier, right?
Right.
Well, I can imagine that being a challenge, not overcomable by any means, but a challenge to selling someone
Right.
is that it's not established. That maybe last year they heard solar wasn't effective at all, and then now they're hearing maybe it is. Like, how have you guys gone about getting people to adopt something that's still somewhat in its infancy of adoption?
Yeah, so the number one, I guess, hurdle for sales in this industry, it seems like, is education.
Mm-hmm.
Educating the customer on the technology, the things that work. That's the number one. It's not difficult to get in front of a customer. It's difficult to get in front of them to educate, I guess. There's tons of, you can put all sorts of advertising on the radio, you can put all sorts of advertising on the billboards, things like that, but it's tough to put all the education on those billboards, all the education on the radio. So you need to be able to get in front of them and educate them. And that's really what our proposal process is going through and educating the customer or the client on solar, what that means for them as far as energy savings, what that means for them as far as investing in their property, and the benefits associated with that. And so then once they're educated, it's a very easy sell once they understand the benefits.
How does that actually look? Is that like a tech meeting with someone at their home and he just starts talking, like gives them a free discovery of what they could be saving a year if they use this based on where their house is? Like, how do you guys go about educating them?
Yeah, so similar to that. So, we sit down with the clients, depending on if it's, residential or commercial, depending on, depends on where we're meeting them at. If, say, it's a residential and we're meeting them at their home, we check out the property, because every home is a little bit different as far as the way the roof is oriented, the pitch of the roof, the type of shingles that they have on the roof. So every system is going to be a little bit different. So we evaluate that, design a kind of a concept system for them and run the energy modeling, take a look at their utility bills and show what their savings would be on a month-to-month basis by going with the solar. And it's an easy evaluation. It's either the numbers work or they don't work,
Yeah. Does anybody ever look at the numbers even when they work and still say, nah, I'm going to stick to the old way?
There's a few people here and there, but a lot of times that's because we didn't do our job well enough in, showing the benefits, addressing any other sort of concerns. If someone just says, no, I'm just not going to go with it, then that means we didn't address all of their concerns that they had.
Yeah, yeah. Now, on that same topic, as we're looking at your company and how successful it's been, and I always say that knowing in your mind, you're probably thinking, yeah, I want to be, but there's so much more growth we have to go. But still, the fact that you're here has separated you from so much of the statistic of people that tried a company that didn't work out.
Right.
What would you attribute, if you maybe 2 or 3 things that come to mind that you think are probably most responsible for the success your company's having?
The things that the company has done, or the things that I've done?
Either, whichever you would say. Like, I think this is one of the reasons why we are so successful.
One of the reasons why I think we're so successful is, I think that from a standpoint of hard work, I think that I know I put in a lot of hours from a standpoint, and the team sees that, they do the same. And, as far as the culture and the group over here, everyone works as a team and, spends the time together whenever they're not in the office. And, it's everyone wants to help out the person next to them. And I think that that's really beneficial in, moving the company forward.
Yeah. Have you done anything intentional to foster that kind of we mentality and that connection between people, or has it just kind of organically evolved?
No, we definitely have. I mean, we have team building events that we do. Events like going bowling, where everybody can just hang out and just kind of get out of the office into a different environment. We have an annual. We stopped doing Christmas parties a while back, and we switched it over to an annual kickoff party. We found that, around Christmas, everyone was so caught up with, needing to, with everything that's going on as far as their family goes, right? So, everyone's going to, their family Christmas parties, or, they've got a trip plan, things like that. And at the end of the day, they really don't care
Right.
about a company Christmas party and it almost feels like an obligation, like they had to be there.
Yep.
So what we started doing is we actually started doing an annual kickoff party. And so we would do it typically like the second or third week of the new year. So everyone's coming back after Christmas, after that time off. And, they're not thinking about, hey, I'm going to, I got to get this, I got to do that for Christmas, that's all clear. And then you can set it up as, this is what we're doing for this year. This is how we're going to be moving forward as far as the year goes, and really set out everything. So it's a late Christmas party, but it's also, setting the goals for the coming year and doing it in more of a recreational environment.
I love that. Very smart pivot. You're taking advantage of almost the momentum of the calendar. Like
Right.
once we get to January, we're already thinking about the year, and so we might as
Right.
well have a get together now. How do you go about setting the big goals for the company each year? Is that you and a leadership team, going away for a few days and having specific conversations? How do you guys figure out kind of the year's goals for the company?
Yeah. So one of the things we've done is just looked at the obviously you got to look at the past to see where you're going as far as the future goes. So, we take a look at what we've done as far as the past year, what has worked well, what hasn't worked well, and then focus on those things that have worked well and how we want to expand upon those. And that's really what we do as far as our planning goes, and where we want to expand to as well. One of the areas of large expansion right now is our residential side. Residential solar has become very popular, and we're really trying to grow that from a standpoint of different states. That takes a little bit more involvement as far as, we have to have an office in each one of the states typically, because it's difficult to absorb travel cost. So there's a lot more that has to be built into growing that side of the business versus some of the other sides of the business. And so, just planning accordingly for that.
How do you go about keeping that in front of you throughout the year? We all have big goals, and then fires happen, life happens. How do you go about keeping that in front of you and making sure you're moving towards it?
Well, I mean, it was easy until COVID hit. and then that really threw a wrench into it. Nobody knew what was going to happen, throughout that. Luckily now I feel like we're kind of coming out of it. Even though there's talks of different things that are, going to happen here or there, I think that at the end of the day, I think that, the majority of Americans don't want to go back into a lockdown, and I think the business will keep moving forward. As far as keeping it in front of me, I just don't like to look back. Just keep looking forward. That's really what what the drive is, and what you do as a CEO is just keep pushing it forward.
Yeah.
And that's, at the end of the day, that's what my role is within the company, and that's what I got to keep in mind.
Do you guys review your metrics and your goals every quarter, things like that, or have weekly meetings about?
Okay. Yeah, every quarter. We break it down. I mean, depending on what the metric is, we look at certain metrics on a week-to-week basis, and then we look at metrics as far as a month goes, metrics as far as a quarter goes, and then annually as well. But it just depends on which matrix we're looking at, right? There's some matrix that we need to look at on a weekly basis, and then some of them, we don't need to look at except for on a quarterly basis. So.
Totally makes sense. What's the primary challenge or question to be answered right now, do you feel like, for your business to move into whatever the next possibility is of growth for you?
Oh, shoot. What is going to be, well, one of the things to always keep, you always got to keep a tab on in this industry, because it is moving. It's always changing, as I mentioned, is what the new technology is, what the technology is going to be here coming up, what pricing is going to be for that technology, and just keep all of that in mind. Is it technology that you feel is going to adapt well to the customer, or is it technology that you feel is going to be the hot topic for a month, and then people realize it's not really worth it, so it's just really keeping an eye on what that technology is that that people are really going to jump on board with. I would say right now, the technology that is really starting to push forward is energy storage along with solar. That seems to be the current push.
Is some of that mandated, and you have to just get to know what the new thing is mandated we use, or is it options that
So
you good?
So in some markets it's mandated, and then some markets it's options, and it really depends on the grids in those markets and what the benefit is to the client.
Gotcha. But you're having to keep a constant radar on the changes, which I assume are pretty rapid. Is technology kind of expanding and adapting pretty quickly in your market?
Yeah, it definitely is, and you can take a look at other areas wherever the cost of energy is a lot higher, and see, because typically they're quicker to adapt new technologies because they can absorb it a little bit better because their cost of electricity is so high as it is. And so you kind of keep an eye on those markets and see what they're doing and what's going to end up, maybe coming to Texas eventually. Like for instance, the energy storage. Right now in Texas, energy storage. A lot of times it's tough to make it pencil whenever you build it into residential projects because the cost of energy is so low here in Texas. But there are some utilities now that are starting to mandate it for some of their incentives and things like that. And so, it's going to be coming eventually.
Yeah. What do you think right now as you're in this industry and in this world, really, this energy world, what do you think the future is in the next 10 years for renewable energy? At
Oh,
least
well,
here, at least here in the States.
Yeah, you definitely just saw it with the current administration. Their huge push. I think 2035 is the they want to be 40% on renewables or solar. So there's definitely a big push right now. You're not going to see any new coal fire plants starting up anytime soon. It's everything's going to renewables. I think it's with the change in generation as well.
Sure.
A lot of the younger generation, as they're taking over as the leaders of the world, are looking back and like, hey, why aren't we using these technologies? Now they're cost effective. If I have the same cost to put in something that generates a bunch of emissions or something that doesn't, why would I go with what generates a bunch of emissions? So, it's starting to make more sense. And I think that it's, the more technology is used, the cheaper in price it comes. And so it makes it more commercially viable and things of that nature.
So help me understand this. If in 2035, if they were actually successful, which we
Right.
know how often our government is not successful at what it aims to do, but
Right.
let's say they hit the mark and it was 40% is now renewable energy. Is that I just don't know the difference between any numbers. Is that a drastic difference between where we are now, or is that
It
a
is,
gradual?
yes, it's definitely a drastic difference.
Okay.
So,
So things would look much different if that were to be true.
right. Yeah.
And would that be primarily on the home side? Would that be on the car side? Like that we're primarily, or 40% of the cars on the road are electric vehicles versus gas vehicles? Like what does that mean?
No, that's right. And I haven't read the whole plan yet. It just came out a couple of days ago. It was, it was just a deployment of a lot more solar. So,
Okay.
all new, energy plants instead of building, a nat gas energy plant would be a solar plant or things like that.
I gotcha.
So it's just a deployment of a lot more.
Gotcha. On the residential side, I'm always curious about like a house for myself. Are there certain areas you just can't do it? Based on the weather patterns and whether you
Yeah.
have a lot of cloud overhang or whatever most of the year. How do you get around that if you're in a place where it's not ideal for it?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that there's a location as far as like a region that doesn't work well. What I would say is more of the home itself or the property itself. Are you underneath a bunch of trees, right? There's
Yeah.
some neighborhoods that they have tons of large trees over top of it. Well, it probably doesn't make sense to put solar on that if your house is shaded, 95% of the day, things like that. So, it's everything's a little bit different. You have to look at, there's never a one size fits all for anything.
Totally makes sense. Like I don't think solar will be going to England or Scotland anytime soon with how overcast and rainy it
Right.
is there every freaking day, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even whenever it's overcast, you still get generation.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, I mean, think about, they say, what is the old adage? Your mom used to always tell you whenever you'd go to the beach or whatever else, and you'd be like, oh, it's cloudy. I don't need to put sunscreen on. Well, you can get most sunburn on the cloudiest of days, right?
True, true.
And it's the same sort of thing because those rays are still coming through there. So that's what creates the electricity is the rays from the sun hitting the semiconductor of the silicon and bouncing off those electrons. So it doesn't matter as far as heat or anything like that for the photovoltaics that we're using. It's those rays from the sun. So it
Yeah.
does still produce on a cloudy day.
Yeah. Point taken. That's a great point. You're right. There's been so many times I thought it's cloudy. I'm not gonna put any sunscreen on, and then just get roasted at Disney World or
Yeah.
wherever you were as a kid.
Yeah.
Man, as let's back up a second. Just as you think about the future, what do you get excited about? I don't mean like the future of the world. I mean the future of this company as the head of it. What gets you up in the morning that gets your juices flowing and excited about what you're doing?
I mean, just that we're changing the world. We're helping people adapt to renewable energy and make those changes. It's great whenever we get a utility bill from a client that says, hey, I haven't paid electricity, I haven't paid the utility in 6 months. Here's
Wow.
my bill. I have a credit of $500 on here for the past few months because nothing's been going to them because I'm generating everything that I consume here, and in excess it's actually going back to the grid and I'm making money off of it. So those are the things that excite you whenever you see that your solution for the client was very beneficial and that they're just as excited about it as you are.
Totally. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Did you get, well, yeah, I guess that just makes me back up and say, how did you even get into this field? Did you just stumble your way into it or?
Kind of. So out of college, I was in banking, and the bank that I worked for did a lot of construction and development financing. Um, I ended up leaving the bank with my friend who was an underwriter there, and we started a company doing, structuring construction and development financing for builders and developers, helping them finance their projects. Well, in 2009 was whenever the Great Recession kind of hit Texas, and there was not any construction in the real estate realm going on at all. So Obama came out with the American Recovery Act, which had a lot of incentives for renewables to help spur the economy. And a lot of the developers that we were working with had these large tracts of land. We're trying to figure out what to do with them. And so they started looking at renewable energy for those. And so kind of learned the financing of those projects, the ins and outs of them, and then eventually started O3 Energy to go out and capitalize on developing our own projects and installing solar ourselves.
Wow. How long did it take before it was obvious that you should actually start your own company doing this?
Oh, probably that was probably about 3 years of doing the finance that finally just was like, okay, well, we should go ahead and start a company developing our own projects.
Mm. Did anybody think you were crazy, or did it feel like the natural series of events?
I mean, it felt like the natural series of events. I mean, people have always throughout the years thought I was crazy for entrepreneurial stuff that I've done. So wasn't anything new, I guess. It wasn't it wasn't outside of the realm or outside of the box for me to do things like something like that.
Yes, yeah. How long until it felt stable? When you were out of the early years of crap, is this going to work? Is it going
Yeah.
to pay the bills? How long did it take till it felt stable?
I would say about a year and a half, 2 years.
Okay.
No. to where it really felt like it was stable and it wasn't just me doing all the work, if that makes sense. Because you can feel like it's stable, but you're the one doing all the work. And at the end of the day, if you were to get hit by a bus, your company would go under, right? And so I think that's a really huge transition point in any company, is going from that initial, it's me as the business, to the business is here by itself without me if I weren't to be here. So, I think there's a huge transition point for any company at that stage.
Yeah, and it's also very confusing sometimes to figure out how to disentangle yourself from a lot of that work, and when do I put someone and where, and what if they can't do it as well as I'm doing it?
Right.
And how did you guys navigate that transition period?
That was definitely very tough for me. I'm not going to lie. I think that's very tough for anyone who's very hands-on. Is exactly what you said. They're bringing in someone else, and then they may not do it as well as me, or if the first time they go to do something and they don't do it as well as you just get frustrated and end up going back to doing it yourself, right? Yeah, exactly. Take it back. But then, at the end of the day, you do that a few times and you realize, look, I'm not going to grow as a company if I keep doing this myself. Going back to the man hours thing, 30 times 24, I don't have that many man hours in my day. So, the thing that I just had to keep remembering is, learning experience. If they don't get it right the first time, let's use this as a learning experience to teach them. And if you look at, it took a few times of, at the front end of teaching someone, whenever you bring on a new employee, it's, it may seem at the time like it's taking up a lot more time, but if you were to step back and look at just doing it yourself over the 2 years that the employee is with you, 4 years that the employee is with you, take a look at that versus the first 2 months of how many hours you're having to put in with that person. Because it may seem like a lot, it may seem very time intensive at the front to teach someone how to do that, and the mistakes that you're having to correct and things like that. But in the long term, it's going to save you a lot of time, and it's just weighing that in your head, and just kind of having to kind of grit your teeth a little bit, like, oh,
bite the bullet,
like just work through the mistake, even though you could have done it better, or correct right off the bat.
Yeah, it's hard for me. I mean, we're somewhat there as a business as well, and I just noticed, similar to you, how
Right.
how emotionally difficult it is. And it feels like you're using a lot of resources that you need, whether it's your own time or money,
Right.
because it'd be cheaper if you did it yourself
Right.
on the very small scale.
Right.
But you're losing out on the money because of the scale capacity that you could gain by having more people able to do things. But you're having to pay that upfront cost for that. Very similar to probably to your business, where people have to pay more to get the solar panels installed and all that kind of stuff, but they're banking on that over the years they're going to
Right.
save so
Yeah.
much more, right?
Yeah. No, a very good metaphor right there. Yeah.
That's why I was like, man, that's actually kind of your business model. And then you have
Yeah.
you have to live it out in real time and be like, hey, gonna have to be patient, gonna have to take time to train someone how to do something that I already know how to do,
Yeah.
but believing that the long-term implications were going to be way in your favor, right?
Right.
How long do you think that lasted, that kind of transition period, before you felt, again, it's always kind of happening in small stages, but before you felt like you'd really shifted it from you doing all the work with some support to now other people starting to do the work that you're supporting?
Well, it didn't all come at once. I would say it came as so it wasn't just one day that it was like, okay, I'm doing everything in the company, to now I've turned over everything to everyone else, right? It's like, okay, well, now I brought on a controller who is now starting to oversee the accounting, and I can offload that to him, get that up and going, get him understanding what's going on with the company, all of that. And then, okay, here's 6 months later, guess what? We're starting to hire a lot of people, and I'm spending a lot of time on interviewing people and things like that. Now I need an HR person. Now I bring on the HR person, start teaching him how to do, what you were doing, and start coordinating, building those processes with them. And then, hey, look, now I need an operations guy to start overseeing the operations, and I can focus on someone with the sales. So, let me start getting that person involved. So it wasn't just all at once. It was kind of pieces as the company grew. And I felt like it made more sense to bring on someone in that role underneath me versus me spending that piece of my time doing that.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about the different seasons a business goes through. So we're talking about that early
Right.
stage where you're going from one man show, maybe a small team of people, to scaling, right? Like
Right.
replacing yourself in some situations. It seems like, and I'm curious if you feel the same, it seems like around 30 to 50 people is where you also go through a new season that I call going from organic to organized, where up until now, everything's been somewhat organic. We just kind of know how to do things here. There's not a ton of processes. There's not the need for too much structure. But then the amount of people starts to almost necessitate some new levels of organization where you're like, well, now we probably need a process for that, or now we
Right.
need to name that, or we need to be better at communicating, and how are we going to do that? Have you guys experienced that? Is that a similar stage you're in?
Yeah, I mean, we've been, I would say early on, we started putting together, standard operating procedures and things like that, probably whenever we got to about, I would say probably about 10 employees.
Okay.
And really, I'd say it started whenever started bringing on that controller or that HR person, when I started offloading like a whole section of the business to someone versus, individual tasks. That's whenever that really started, and it started building those SOPs so that everyone within that group could be on the same page.
Yeah.
Also, not just that, but also filing systems, right? You start getting multiple people, getting on a shared drive, looking for documents and things like that. And if everybody's kind of using their own way to organize it, you're never going to find a document. So, little things like that. It's just, just how you can kind of, and at the end of the day, you kind of think of the way the military does it, right?
Hmm.
Like how would the military organize something like this? They would look at it as a standard way to put things together and how people, work together. So that's kind of the thought process behind getting it organized.
Super cool. It's yeah, great foresight that you were doing that earlier in the company's growth than later.
Right.
I think you're actually ahead of a schedule in a good way.
Yeah. Thanks.
We normally see that much later, and maybe it's necessitated by even the kind of industry you're in, where there's got to be some standard operating procedures and servicing these accounts and things like that that are very particular, and you can't really wing that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Love it. Well, man, this has been fascinating. Let's jump into our lightning round questions, and then I'll let you get
Okay.
back to your day. So we've got 5 lightning round questions that we have asked every founder that's been on the podcast, and we're going to do the same with you. So we're going to start with question number 1. If you could ingrain one message into your entire organization, what would that message be?
Treat the company as if it was your own,
I love that.
as if you were the owner.
Yeah. Yeah. You take that kind of personal accountability and responsibility for this place, right?
Exactly. Personal accountability.
Yeah. Love that. All right. Question number 2. First thing that comes to mind, you might, if you thought about it more, you might have a different answer, but that's fine. What is the single best advice you've ever gotten about growing your business? And also, what was the worst advice?
Oh, shoot. The best advice that I ever got about growing my business. I'd say the best advice that I ever got about growing business was on the marketing side. Starting off from growing a business or starting a business, a lot of times you think, oh, I'm just going to create a business and people are just going to come to the business, right? And marketing guy told me once, he's like, the biggest mistake that marketing people always have is thinking that people actually give a shit about your business.
Yes.
And that's so true, because you have to go out and chase the business. You can't just sit there and wait for it to come to you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a huge misnomer that people have from a business standpoint. The worst business advice that I ever got. I wouldn't say that this was advice. This was advice that I heard from a professor a business professor that I heard speaking one time, and it was, don't worry about the revenue model. You need to focus on, what was it? Basically said too many people focus on the revenue model for their business, and they need to focus on, just what the business stands for. And I was like, that's a nonprofit.
Right.
Like, I
That's a charity.
Like at the end of the day, if you're a for-profit, you need to figure out what, your revenue model, how it's going to make money. If you're just wanting to understand, if you're just wanting to stand for something, that's a nonprofit.
Yeah. Sounds like a great way to create a hobby or a charity.
Exactly. Yeah. No.
I love it. All right. Question number 3. What causes you currently the most stress or worry leading this organization?
What causes me the most stress or worry? Honestly, the environment, I would say. What's going on as far as what's going to happen as far as the economy, or what's going to happen as far as maybe some sort of governmental changes.
Yeah, I can totally see that, especially for your industry.
Right.
Okay, number 4. What is your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal for this company?
I would like to surpass 100 million in revenue, and eventually either take the company public or take on a large investor.
Heck yeah. How long do you give yourself to get there?
I would say within the next 5 years.
Wow. Awesome. Really exciting to see.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 5. This is our fun, creative question for you. So we're going to play a game of Back to the Future. If you get to hop into a DeLorean, you get to go back to your past, but there's a rule. You're not there to change anything or whatever, but you get to pass along a message to yourself. When would you go back, and what's the message you would pass along to that younger version of yourself?
That's very easy. The first thing that I would do is go back to someone like myself that was, starting off as far as whenever I was first starting businesses, and say, find a mentor or someone who has been through it before, and that you can pick their brain and bounce things off of.
Love it. Brad, this has been awesome, man. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Let me take a deep dive into your world, your company's world, and it is clear to see why you have been so successful, and I'm excited to see your continued success in the future. So I appreciate you being here, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Drew.
Yes, sir.
Founders, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and hop into our monthly founder email so we can ensure you stay on the edge of peak performance and massive business results.